and sometimes it is so difficult to figure out what to do, and sometimes you really don't know what to say there, and or how to take an action. That's the question. If I clear enough, if I am clear enough, I don't know.
Sure. It- you know, what is right or wrong? I agree with your supervisor that says that, sometimes we don't know what's right or wrong. Sometimes what's right, well, in my opinion, what's right is what is it that's going to bring some healing, some comfort, some nurturing to the person that whose heart is breaking. Everybody in a hospital is in grief. The patient's in grief because of their condition. The family members, the loved ones are in grief because their loved one is hurting and they're helpless. The staff is in grief because, if only we had more resources, we could do more. And my humor is, the administration's in grief because they can't get enough money out of the insurance companies. So everybody's grieving about something. What's going to bring some comfort to them? What's going to bring some hope? And I define hope as holding on to positive expectations, because when we have hope, there's a positive expectation. So what are we going to, how are we going to help them find the hope in their life? Somebody says, I'm dying. They've said, I've got 3 months to live. Well, where's the hope in that? You've got 3 months to reconcile with your family. You've got 3 months to find some peace with yourself, to reconcile with your condition, because when you're fighting it. So what's going to bring them hope? What's going to bring them some comfort? What's going to bring some healing and reconciliation in their lives? That's what's right. Even if you do something, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to. And you can tell me to hush. Even if you do something that the administration says we can't do at this hospital. Well, if that's what the person needs, if that's what's going to bring healing, then it's our responsibility to do something. So I want to bounce back. We're right now we're talking about hospitals, but chaplaincy is much broader than just hospitals. Chaplaincy has gone out to, in one of your slides on there, you put up there, working. They're a spiritual leader in an institution of some kind. You working with the Air Force, that's not a hospital unless you're assigned to the hospital. You see, as an Army chaplain, most of my time was not spent in the hospital. So a lot of people, I want to take this aside and say, what is the difference between a minister or an imam and a chaplain? There's some distinct differences. Yeah. The minister or the imam, number one, is generally a leader of a particular religious group. The chaplain is the spiritual leader of everybody in his or her complex, regardless of their religious background. They're the spiritual leader. A minister of imam generally gets together with the same people on a regular basis. And a chaplain, a chaplain in a hospital, how many times do you have the same people day after day? You generally have a different group every day, right? A minister or imam is working with their same group. They all have pretty much the same vocabulary and theological foundation understanding in some way. The chaplain works with people who don't have any religious background, or maybe they're atheist, or maybe they're whatever other religion of the thousands different kind of religious backgrounds. And so that's a wide variety. Minister of imam, generally the responsibility is to lead worship and to teach the religious foundations. The chaplain's main responsibility is not teaching or leading worship. It's out there to care for the spirit, the heart, the emotions, the minds of the people that they're working with, which is a much deeper, in my mind, a much deeper, much broader way. And so going back to your question, Tuba, is, you know, what's right in this situation is, what is it that's going to nurture? What is it that's going to bring reconciliation, that's going to bring hope, that's going to bring healing to this person we're working with, you see? To me, that's the answer. And how do I, if I don't feel like going in, how do I get myself to go into a hospital room? Sometimes I've had people say to me, this is what I have, what they've said, this is what I have to do. And I've thought about it, and sometimes I've had to do the same, is before I go to visit this person, whether it's hospital, whether it's out in the field as a military chaplain, whether it's visiting a home, is, you know, right now, I may be the only representative of God's love that this person has. I may be the only one here that God has to visit with this person and give some love and some encouragement. And that's more important than my own nervousness or my own hindrances. That's where I am with that. Maybe you want me to be quiet and y'all can go on. Maybe Latifa, it's your turn.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
With therapeutic field from therapist. As a therapist, you can share your approach. By the way, Tubanur is collecting the questions from the chat box. Even she is translating simultaneously while you speak.
Yeah, I tried to write it in Turkish for the for our some of our guests who are listening and trying or having hard time to understand English. I know what it means. I went through all of that. So that's why please let me just explain in Turkish. Sevgili dinleyenlerimiz, ben aynı anda Türkçe çeviri yapıyorum arka tarafta chat box'larına. Pinpoint'leri, önemli noktaları yazıyorum. Hani eğer ki anlamakta zorlanıyoruz ya da İngilizcemiz yok, sıkıldık diyorsanız lütfen chat box'a bakınız. Here you go. I just explained in Turkish as well.
Also, she is a licensed interpreter. She will translate this conversation for the YouTube link. You will see later, inshallah.
They also want the presentation to go slower. Just let some slides sit, then later on change it, please. This is a request from the listeners. Thank you.
I am trying to show the proper pages. That's why I jumped some of them, skipped out some of them.
I see. Okay. I would like to hear Sister Latifa's also insights.
So the question being, what is right and wrong? I think when you enter into a room to see someone or they've come to see you, that the best you can do as a human is to be present and to be aware. So present meaning to be aware of like what's your state at the moment, and to be totally there, not thinking as much, like, did I give my kids lunch money or did my husband do this? To be present in the moment with them and to be sincere, and then to realize you're going to have good days and bad days. So what this brought up for me is a memory that you will make mistakes. I just want to say that you will make mistakes, and some of the mistakes are the best teachers. So when my mom died, it'll almost be 10 years this Christmas, I made a promise to myself that I would allow myself to feel every emotion, because I wanted to be present with what I was feeling with her dying and passing. Well, many of my clients came in around Christmas wanting to talk about a loved one dying. And this stirred up a whole lot of grief within me. And so I was very present with it, feeling it in my body that I felt sad and I could feel the grief coming up. And I would say to myself, not out loud, but I would say to myself, I feel the grief and I will honor it, but not right now. Right now, I'm here to serve whoever this person is, but I promised myself that I'd go for a walk later and cry and feel the grief and move it. And that worked. That was a beautiful lesson for me, in that I could still be present with what I was feeling and what I was going through in my own life, but it didn't take over the session, or it didn't trump the session. And that I had to learn, because when I was working with men who committed terrible offenses, I shut down so many of my emotions not to feel anything that I became sick. And so it's learning how to be present with what you're feeling, because there's a deep sadness when you're with people who are deeply ill, but to also honor that, to feel it, and then to be present with who the person is that you're serving, but also to make time that you as a human being will have feelings being with this person, and also just what's going on in your life, and you will make mistakes.
Yeah, it is amazing how come you learn, or you, with experience, you taught yourself to be able to shut some of your feelings. What's the word? I don't know, but try to avoid, or what's the word? I want you to go deeper, if you don't mind, in that regard, to be able to meet the person who commit terrible offenses. This is very important for me to understand, because of the fact that I'm a mother. Being a mother sometimes makes your heart so tender that you cannot actually you know, some feelings, when someone harms a kid, let's say, youngsters, you cannot help yourself to stop some kind of feelings. So if you go deeper a bit, how you handle to be able to control your feelings in that regard, until later on, to, let's say, or to be able to connect with that person.
So there's a saying in the Bible, and Ron, you can absolutely correct how I say it. But I grew up with this saying, and it's from Jesus, Isa, peace and blessings upon him. And Jesus said in the Bible, whatsoever you do to the least of my brother, that's what you do unto me. And at the time I was working with convicted men who committed sexual offenses. It was a time in our country where they were looked down upon like the lepers, or, like the worst of the worst. And so I would repeat that saying over and over to myself, that I tried to refer to them, these were men who made a poor choice to hurt someone, versus labeling them as a sex offender. I had to make space in my own head that these were also brothers who made terrible mistakes. And, I served over 1,000 men in my time as a sex offender treatment provider. And their journey changes. Some are in denial, and then some will make it out of the denial and then go into true regret. And then some will actually have a change in their life. I think being aware of what you feel, to me, I had to seek my own counseling, to talk so that I didn't take it into the session. And just to be aware that this is stirring up some fear, this is stirring up some paranoia with my children. But that's a lesson also, Tuba, to say, oh, I have this feeling. But feelings are ones that can move. And so to remember that I had both, that I had a I had my Lord Jesus saying, whatsoever you do to the least of my brother, that's what you do unto me. And then also the feelings of, oh my gosh, some of these stories are so terrible. And I wasn't Muslim at the time for all of it, but I would do a washing. I'd wash my hands, I'd wash my face, I'd change my clothes when I got home, and I'd go for a run. And to really move that energy and those stories off of me, so I did not take them home. And when I became a Muslim, wudu was so important to me. And also listening to the Quran as I drove home and learning healings for myself so that I didn't take it home or it didn't penetrate my dreams or my soul.
Wonderful, wonderful explanations. And how, as a therapist, you're helping yourself and using the training or techniques on your life to help yourself is also beautiful. Also, I think be courageous enough to help those kind of people. I think is already, as a female therapist, is already on itself is by itself is something. I mean, one of the most bravest thing in the world. I think as a female, I just cannot imagine myself, but I mean, how come, or just let me just tell this and then one thing, open a parenthesis. But as a mother, I also as a therapist, let's say, I realize that if a person gives harm to anyone, I know my colleagues also know this, but I just want to remind all of us or just bring it to the table to discuss. Knowing this sometimes helps me to understand the person. Like, whenever a person does something terrible, I realize that in the background, when you look at holistically as a whole picture, as a human being, the whole picture, and go back to their childhood, you realize that they were also a victim of someone. And this is the thing that helped me all the time to, because maybe there might be cases who are not victims but still abusers. But I mean, statistically, I think this is what I realized after doing some research. Most often, when someone is harmed as a child, sexually or physically or psychologically, they are going to harm someone in the future. But this might be their spouses, this might be their children. So, and with a therapist, when they work, or as a chaplain, when you compassionately hug them, like in terms of like emotionally, or accept them where they are, and just let them share their own experience, I think the healing starts, the healing process starts. And also for us, this is one point that helps me sometimes, coming across with people who has horrible stories, to be able to see them as a child helps me actually, like as a victim, yeah, and the compassion in my heart blossoms, I can say. Is Dr. Ron here? I cannot see his face.
Yeah, here.
I'm here.
So, do you have any other questions? Otherwise, I'll ask regarding the coronavirus quarantine process, how it affects our professions. How did you serve your patients, clients? That's the question. Or even.
By the way, Honor, I think we are almost about to like it is 2:25, right? Yes. So our time limit is almost coming to end, but we start 10 minutes later. If it is okay for our attendees, colleagues, for my colleagues, maybe we can just make it, add an extra 10 minutes or 15 minutes. What do you think?
We talked before that, 1.5 hours, the frame of the program. Then we will respond to questions the last 30 minutes. There are many questions, maybe it is enough. Totally 2 hours we planned. Yeah.
Are you available? I mean, this is just to confirm, because this was the plan, right? Like, because I remember 1 hour and 30 minutes, but I might be wrong. Okay. Okay, then. If they're okay with that, I'm okay with that. You know, I'm flexible.
Conversation part, 30 minutes for each person. Then the last minutes for the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So we started to talk about the coronavirus effect of our profession. The form of the service changed radically, I believe. Face-to-face is so important in our service, but now look at our situation. We are together on Zoom, new era. What do you think, Dr. Ran? Did you imagine, I mean, this kind of situation, for example, 25 years ago, quarter century?
25 years ago, I barely had a computer. So absolutely, I didn't imagine this at all. At the same time, about 25 years ago, I was at an Army conference and a guy was talking about there will be a time when we would be kind of secluded in an apartment. Most people would be in an apartment or their home, and they would call on the phone and order food to be brought in, and we would conduct church services by internet. We would communicate with email and the telephone and hardly ever come into physical contact with each other. They were also talking about in the military, out on the battlefield, you know, chaplains would record the worship services on CDs and pass them out or send them out electronically, rather than being there with the people. Frankly, I'm glad that in my time, all that wasn't in place, because for me, my heart is to be there, as Latifa said, to be there with the person, to walk with them in their struggles, to be a comfort to them, be with them there. Now your question was, how does it affect here? Of course, I've been retired during this whole time, so I mean, my main ministry is here with my family, my 2 dogs and my wife.
Also, you are serving your CP students.
Yes, right. I do know in the church congregation that I'm a member of, we have several chaplains, and they are struggling to do appropriate care by telephone. They call into the patient's rooms. One guy is a chaplain at a cancer center, and he's concerned that he may pick up something from somewhere else and bring it to some of his cancer patients, and be the instrument for them getting the disease. This is a situation in which I believe God is calling us, all of us, to be involved in prayer and concern for those who have to be out there serving others and can't be isolated. And there was something on the internet yesterday that over 650 first-line caregivers, doctors, nurses, etc., have died from this disease, and the number hasn't stopped yet. So one of the ways that we all can be involved is by supporting them, by praying for them, and if there's anything physical we can do.
Yeah.
Stop
May I
there.
protect them? They are in the front line for fighting against the virus on behalf of human beings, for us. That's why all our prayers with them. I remember when we started our CP, Clinical Pastoral Education training, at the center, physically. Then the circumstances radically changed. And now maybe the first time one CP is going on online without going to field, because there's no chance to go to the hospital.
Right.
So what do you think? How it affect our CP? Can we get the certificate?
Oh, can we get certified? I believe so. Well, we're aiming at that. Um, and yes, we can get certified because even though we can't be out right at present, can't be out there physically with the people we serve, we can be there electronically by telephone or by video, and have have almost the same contact with them. Um, a big part of the CPE training, um, a big part of that is looking at our interactions with other people, describing them, writing them down, reading them to the group, getting feedback so we can find out, okay, how could I have approached this differently? And we can do that with, actually, there are a lot of written verbatims that we could use and interact with and do the analysis of and learn from other people's experiences. We can have phone conversations and take that and do the analysis of that conversation and learn how to approach people differently. Yeah, so we can get certified.
That's a good, wonderful news.
I would like to take a moment, if I may, and because you had asked me to kind of describe what CPE is for people that are interested but don't know anything about it. Can I do that now, or is?
Sure. This
Okay.
is the time. Yeah.
All right. So CPE stands for Clinical Pastoral Education. It's clinical because it was initially created in hospitals to teach ministers how to address and how to work with people who are in hospitals. And actually, it started out in a mental hospital. And I wound up in the mental hospital. And so, at the beginning and end for me. But so it's called clinical because it's teaching people how to be God's representative in a clinical situation, generally outside of a church or congregation or community, worship community, outside of that. It's called pastoral because it's the pastor is caring for the person, not just necessarily teaching or preaching or conducting worship. It's caring for the person, the inner person. It's education, but it's not just school learning. It's not just academic. It's focusing on training, practice, training, working out there in a practical basis. Kind of like a dentist can learn about the structure of the mouth, but has to practice on teeth in order to become a good dentist, right?
Yes.
And so this is the process of clinical pastoral education. And one of the big things is trust the process. We may not see right now what's going on, but there's a process of growth. In being a pastor, a minister, an imam, a chaplain, or therapist, I believe the greatest tool that we have is who we are and understanding ourselves. And as we understand ourselves, then we can help to understand other people. And that connection is what, like Latifa says, that connection helps us to be with somebody. And as Tuba Noor said, when we understand that this person is hurting, there's a reason for it. Whether they're hurting because they've made some really bad mistakes and done some bad things. Well, where did that model come from that they were reacting with? And how can we work at healing? Maybe they're hurting because of a physical something. And their need is to find hope and encouragement to go through it rather than just giving up. Maybe their need is to come to reconciliation with the fact they're not going to come through. anyway, that's part of the practical training and working with people. Okay, I mean, I've got a whole lot more I can talk about, but right now we had something else.
Yeah, I think time to ask the questions belong to the audience. They already shared in the chat box. One, Roger, could you?
Questions. I have questions for Dr. Ron, but for our audience, if they want to address any questions to our speakers, please don't hesitate to. Let me say it in Turkish, and also I can translate for them while by writing without interrupting. Sevgili dinleyenlerimiz, eğer sorularınız varsa Türkçe yazabilirseniz hemen çeviririz ve yönlendirebiliriz. Bu iki kıymetli insanın ilminden faydalanmak isteyenler için bir dipnot olmuş olsun. Yes, I have a question for Dr. Ron. When Sister Latifa told about her experience related to the people that she met as a therapist, like the men maybe who commit the worst of the worst, let's say maybe terrible things in their life, how she handled or how she addressed the needs of those people by working with her own feelings. This question is for the same question is for Dr. Ran. When you work in the military or any other settings, if that have you ever met such kind of people? And as a man, different from being a female, of course, our human dynamics, I think, is different in this regard to some extent, depending on the person. What's your experience, and how did you handle or address the person's need when you meet with these kind of people, if you did? This is my question for Dr. Ran.
How did I meet the needs of the different people in the military when I was a chaplain?
Not only different people. I mean, in military setting or in any other setting, in a hospital setting, when you hear their stories, which actually challenge you in such a way that you have to handle your own feelings, you have to work with your own feelings, like Sister Latifa mentioned about. Have you ever had such an experience? If you had, could you please share with us?
Yes. Of course, for me, a number of different situations in which, when military people go out to do training, actually what I've said to the military people I meet now is thank you for your sacrifice, because people don't realize that once we sign on the paper, the dotted line, and then we raise our hand and swear an oath, we don't know that we're ever going to come back. And people out, even going out to the back fields in Fort Hood to drive tanks, to shoot weapons, to whatever, there's always a danger. And there have been a number of times that I've been there when persons have been injured. My first month in Afghanistan, I was in a convoy that was hit by a suicide bomber. It blew up next to the vehicle right in front of us. All 4 people in that vehicle were injured. Fortunately, they lived, but they're all injured badly. My response, of course, was trying to first help with the physical injuries, but then to accompany them on the helicopter into the hospital. I was there with them while they were waiting surgery. I went into the surgery room with them, praying for them. I came out with my heart broken, and I still feel it now. It's very, very difficult in those kind of things. I have to, as Latifa said, in that situation, my focus is on the person that's doing the hurting, and then I draw back, and then I can take time to work on my own emotions.
Mhm.
There was
That's
a time when I was at Texas A&M that that was the first day of bonfire cut. Kids were cutting down trees for the big bonfire when that was a part of their tradition. On the way back, 2 pickup trucks turned over with 16 people in them, most of them in the back. I spent 7.5 hours in the emergency room with them, being able to work with them and the staff. And then I cried all the way home. That's the way that I handle it. The important thing is the person. When I withdraw, I have to handle this.
Mhm.
And if I don't take time handling my own hurt and my own grief, then it's going to interfere when I'm trying to work with someone else. So that's how I do it, as kind of like Latifa said.
Mhm. Withdraw and then take care of your own feelings. Let them out. Let's say, let yourself feel what you want to feel or just comes from your heart, right? Then
Yeah,
take care of yourself, maybe, so you can continue, right? You can keep going because being chaplain is drenching at the same time if you
yes,
don't
it
take care
is.
of yourself. Yeah.
And also, like Latifa said, is in interacting with other people who understand, being the client with other chaplains that could listen to me, or in a private counseling session or something like that. Those are important healing things. See, we expect our clients to relate to us. Are we also willing to be the client somewhere else?
Mhm.
So thank you. That's a great question. Thank you.
Mhm. Thanks for the explanation.
I believe, and I remember Tuba Nur Hoca has the same situation while she was the intern chaplain at the hospital setting. Uh, she had to go to hospital as the patient because of the burden of the uh, patient's problems. Can you mention?
Um, Actually, yeah, as a chaplain, I know what it means to put your oxygen mask on your face before the others maybe, or keep to be able to keep going. We have to take care of ourselves as therapists or psychiatrists or these chaplains. I think it's for each profession or teachers or educators or as moms. It's a common reality. But I mean, for me, I remember after the CPE program, after getting my training in CPE, I realized that being an emotional person and also being a female and seeing some issues which is really tough to see, like babies are dying and mothers are standing behind, like just right there, and these kind of really extreme cases. After coming across in the hospital setting, I realized that I start having low depression, and I realized that I have to take a, as I say, withdraw and take care of myself to let myself maybe nourish myself first and to be able to continue in that. um, since Honor knows me beforehand, he also um, he knows what I went through, and then after some time I started just taking care of myself. I gave myself some time because I was so busy with my education, with my own personal life, and taking care of patients and learning this and that. I realized that I just actually ignore myself. I just put my own needs back, which is come forward and say, take care of me, take care of me. And then I just take some time, and it helped me, as you say, withdrawing and helping, taking care of your own needs is very important. So that's a life lesson for me. Thanks for bringing up Honor, and it's all important for all chaplain friends who are listening, or for all people who are planning to take this education, go have this call. Yeah.
So maybe Latife has a similar experience or memory as therapists because they face serious issues as well, isn't it? Mr. Latifa?
Yes, and you know, I hear Tuba and I so understand. And um, as therapists and as females, you know, we feel so deeply.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
sometimes you don't even realize how much your soul and your heart is working to take the pain, you know, to help other people carry the pain. And then it becomes so normal, you don't realize you've got a level of like a dark cloud over your head. Um, and so I've had to learn um, that, you know, my question was, well, God never gives you more than you can handle. So I guess everybody knocking at my door, I'm supposed to take as a client. And that ended up making, I got very, very ill, physically ill, because I was seeing so many clients and taking
Exactly.
on.
I
And
Yes,
so
understand.
I had to realize too, you know, that I needed to ask, am I to take this client or am I to refer? Or can I say no? You know, I'm full right now. So that was a beautiful lesson to honor, you know, to give yourself some of the Rahman, the Rahim, some of the mercy and the compassion, that you're just a helper for God. You don't have to do everything.
Exactly. Because we are human beings. It's impossible. We are not, we have a famous saying in Turkish that we are not made of rock.
Yeah.
Yani taş değilsin. We say taş değilsin, insansın. Yani you are not a stone, made of stone. You're a human being. So it's very important, I think, to take care of our own needs as well, to be able to help others.
that's another side of the case. We are not stone, but we are not sünger.
Sponges.
Yeah, we don't have to, we are not the magnet to take everything on us.
Yes.
So that is the balance between them. When I was a young guy, I was so sad regarding the war, Bosnia war. I was feeling sorry. Every day I was mentioning about it. And my father finally told that God has much more mercy than you. Don't worry about it. He is Alim, he is Semir, he is Qadir, he knows everything. And there is a verse, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. You just mentioned about it. He our shoulders more than our capacity. So that's why it's important to find balance. Yeah.
So
Balance.
one of our listeners asked a question, addressed a question, and says that sometimes people say if you have English or if you have a language, if you live in a Western country or let's say here, if you know the language, why don't you go ahead and just start from somewhere and helping people with like mentally or emotionally? And she says she is into her education. One of the questions she mentioned about she started taking classes about theology, start from somewhere, but she says language is not enough. I think education, how to be present, like how to like chaplain's education or CPE is the bedrock of this education, I believe. um, Without it, she says, it's difficult, and people sometimes without knowing this, ignoring this, think that language is enough only by itself. It is not enough, I believe. So she says, and I agree with her in this regard. Because to be able to draw your boundaries and be to be able to be present, of course, as human beings we can support with our with the best intention, but I mean in a clinical situation, in a clinical setting, you have to really do the CPE and to be able to get the education and under the help of a supervisor, I think. So I don't know what Dr. Ron thinks about in this context. Could you
Yes,
please?
we would talk about the CP offers by from Respect School.
Mm-hmm.
After Ron, would you like to mention about our CP training? Then many people are asking to join, but this is already set up. So we need to open the new courses. So how do you explain our situation? Is it useful for the newcomers as well? language barrier is the real barrier, or what do you want to tell?
I'm not quite sure I heard the question. Can you, I don't think I heard all of it as it.
Okay. Sure.
Say again.
You know, one of our listeners, audience, mentioned this question that education is very important to be able to do this, like the work of a chaplain. Or sometimes people approach and tell me that with a good intention, you have a language, you have your language, you're proficient in your language. Why don't you help people? Why don't you do this kind of things? They think that language is only by itself is enough, but she says, I don't think that it is enough. And as a supervisor, CPE supervisor, clinical pastoral education supervisor, and as a chaplain, what do you think education or clinical pastoral education is? How much it is important? How it is important in this context?
Okay. First of all, we have to realize that there's a continuum, right? So my answer basically is yes and no. Education is important because, as I said, the theories, the tools that are given in the education, the practice and training, the feedback we get as we're going through the training helps us to refine and understand ourselves so that we use the gifts that God has created within us in a, you know, a more effective way. Understand ourselves and help us understand other people. And in the process of that, of these things, education provides a firmer foundation, provides a broader expanse of ourselves, because learning to use ourselves is the greatest tool. Now, on the other hand, when I think about it, you know, the author of my faith and the author of your faith, neither of them had much education. So I'm sure they didn't do a very good job of talking to people, did they?
Can you tell whom you are talking about? I just missed.
I'm sorry, say that
Like,
again.
I think you are referring to someone who has no education and still helping people. Whom they are? I just missed the names or whom
I
you.
said the author of my faith and the author of your faith,
Oh, I
Jesus and
I see.
Muhammad.
You are talking about messengers and prophets and
Yeah,
as a role model. Yeah, they were
they.
Prophet Muhammad. Yeah, it was illiterate. Peace be upon all of them. Yeah, exactly.
So what was the key? The key ingredient. The key ingredients were their heart to serve God's people and their heart to listen to God and bring God's presence to the people. Now, you know, Tubanura, if you're in a situation you haven't had the education you had, but you're the only one there to help someone that is
Exactly.
hurting, you
Mhm.
know, should you say, no, you know, I don't have this education, so I can't really do that. No, if you're the one that's there, you're the representative of God, and you can still bring God's love and God's spirit. So yes, with that kind of a heart, the education really expands things. And of course, without education, the institutions where you want to serve probably won't allow you to serve in those positions. So in those two senses, the education is very important. Can someone do spiritual ministry without the education? Depending upon their heart to serve and their heart to listen to God. Yes. That's my answer. So it's, you know, it's you can get it whatever you want to out of it.
These are two wings of the bird, education and also the language complete each other. To fly, we need both, I believe.
Like both wings, yes. Yeah, I mean, it's important, but heart, I think this is a profession of heart. As we put the title as healing of the soul and heart. So, I mean, as a human being working with our own feelings and addressing a human being as a whole is very important, I think. Um, Education is a must, maybe is a plus, but this doesn't mean that uh, thanks for reminding me the fact that this doesn't mean that we avoid helping people or reaching out, because sometimes you are just there and maybe you are the only one to help the person, and they need just a word of compassion. And you shouldn't think maybe that, oh, I don't have the education, I shouldn't say anything, don't be tiny, maybe, that's the message I got actually. So, Honor, how about time? How many minutes we have? I think, what do you think? We should
Just
wrap up maybe.
6 more minutes. As you say, sometimes our smiling face, sometimes our tears needed by the patient, according to the patient. It depends on the patient.
Mm-hmm.
So you can ask the vital questions from our audience. Then we will continue. This is the third program regarding chaplaincy and related areas like therapy. So what is the next question to Ban Roja?
I'm just checking the questions right now.
Okay, you are not ready. I will ask Dr. Ran, the clinical pastoral education, CPE. Even though you are retired, although you are retired, you started to work with the new students. What is your motivation? Why do you do that?
Oh, my motivation is see, my heart is for people to receive healing and to receive the presence of God. Okay, so I'm retired. I can't be out there, but even if I was out there, I'd still want to be doing the same thing. Um, you know, I care about those of you, and right now it's those of you in our group. I care about you finding success in your ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I care about the people that you're ministering to. And my desire is to help people, to give whatever I can so that people know better how to reach out to other people. Right now, since I can't go to the hospital, if I'm training those of you in the class, well, there are 9 of you that can go out, where with me it's only 1. And my desire is that you do a better job than I ever could. If I can help you in 1 step, that's where I am.
This is the father's approach, Fathers don't be jealous about their kids, also mothers. So that's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tuban Roja, other questions? We have limited time.
The question one of our audience asked about, as an army chaplain, sometimes you come across people with experiences. If I understand it right, in a right way, let me just check it again. Sometimes, how come we can handle the what's the best way to especially for chaplains in the army. Let me read it. Generally speaking, sometimes states and armies might do some wrong things or crimes when they're working in operations in another country. As a chaplain in the army or as a part of the army, how should we think or feel in this regard? And I think it's exactly, it's a kind of clash situation, or how to name it. How can you address this question, Dr. Ram?
Okay. There's a little bit of interference, so let me rephrase the question and you can correct me if I'm wrong. The
Sure.
question is, if I'm a chaplain, I go out there, one or more of our soldiers have done something illegal, something wrong.
Mhm.
How do I address them?
Address these kind of situations, since having your own feelings again maybe come to the point that we made already, but somebody knowing this is wrong, and as a chaplain, what's your role and how to address these kind of problems, or issues, let's say, to make it more neutral.
Okay. So there's a difference between addressing the person and addressing the situation.
Mm-hmm.
In addressing the situation, if they're doing something wrong, my responsibility is to address them with both the ethics and the morals of what they're doing. Of course, there's the difference between ethics and morals and legality. There's some things that are not ethical or morally wrong, but they're illegal, like driving through a stop sign, right? Now, so addressing the ethical and the moral wrong, an important part is, first of all, we have to settle it within ourselves. And then to bring up to those who are doing it, state that it's wrong, and try to address with them where their ethics and morals are.
Like base your ideas onto their own beliefs and ethical systems, right? We cannot enforce our own way of thinking or belief system, right? Can you just clarify a bit?
That's correct. We can't. There's an old saying that a fool convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. If somebody says, hey, I'm doing this, I don't care whether it's right or wrong, no matter how much you try to convince them, they're not going to change, right? But there are systemic, ethical, and moral situations that can be addressed, and sometimes people aren't aware of the wrong, and where we can make them aware of the moral situation, they may back off and change their behavior. They may not. And then if it becomes a legal situation with them, my approach to address the individual is, am I going to focus on the situation or the person? Because as we've said already, the persons that's doing wrong things, it's because they've had a bad model or they've had an injury themselves. It's not just out of the blue, they decide, hey, I'm going to do this bad thing. And so where's the healing to take place within that person? And I try to look to find the seeds of God's character within them to help those grow. But yes, it is a big problem, because a lot of times out in the field, you may not have the opportunity or the time or the freedom to really address that. So it is a problem. But we know from centuries of war, of military practice, that people do bad, that the military does bad and illegal things, sometimes out of ignorance, sometimes because they're told and they have to follow orders or whatever. It is a really sticky situation. It's a good question. Thank you.
And one more maybe addition, just a short addition input. If there is a situation which is related to the system, there's a problem related to system and the abuse of the person, like the person's abuse of the system, what should be the step to take? I think in this case, we should take action, right? As a chaplain, as a professional. What do you think?
I can speak in the Army situation, the military situation, because there's a hierarchy. The first step the chaplain takes would be to talk with his supervisory chaplain, his or her supervisory chaplain. The next step would be to talk with his supervisory commander. Generally, if there's a wrong, the supervisory chaplain can sometimes, because they're a higher level, can sometimes come in and speak to the higher commander. Sometimes if I talk to my commander, the commander doesn't see it or doesn't agree and says we're going to do it anyway, then my responsibility is to go to the next commander, but always contacting my supervisory chaplains, because the chaplains are unique in the military, in the U.S. military, because we have two lines of of communication: our chaplain chain and the command chain. The captain, the brigade commander, the division commander. So we can address this way. We can also address this way. And sometimes the higher commander, higher ranking chaplain can address the wrong at a different level too. And sometimes it just isn't accepted anywhere.
If the person thinks that they start becoming part of the systems, part of how can I explain? The question is like this: if the chaplains start thinking that the system itself, to some extent, is problematic in its approach to civilians, or let's say in the operation, let's say, what should be the step to take as a chaplain if we think that we are being part of a thing which we think that ethically is not legal or right to in our own understanding? What should be the step to take? The person's asked.
Well, once again, the first step is to address our chaplain chain.
Again, the hierarchy.
The hierarchy, but in the spiritual direction. That's the first step. Is to address that. To get the advice of those who have been around, who are older, who've been around it, who know more about the system, and work more with the system. Because the higher you go up in the hierarchy, the more you're working with system rather than individuals. So that's the first step. For me, I'll just say, for me, as I started as a new Army chaplain, and after about 3 years, I realized that I could not be a part of, a system person. And so that's why I left and went into the reserves, and went to do my doctorate in psychology. I stayed with the system, not because of the system, but because of the individuals that I believe that God had called me to serve. And I never really wanted to go up in rank because I wanted to work with the soldiers. I was fortunate being able to do that my whole career. But I mean, that doesn't really answer your question in such. A lot of times it is an individual decision to stay or leave. If they stay, then they can work through their professional chain of chaplains much better than through the chain of command.
I just missed. Can you just rephrase what you said in the last 2 sentences? I just cannot get what you say. Sorry about that while doing the translation.
Okay. Thank you for reminding me. If an individual chaplain feels like they can't work with the system or feels like the system is wrong, each of us needs to decide, can I stay here and work in this system or not?
We have the option, you say, right?
We can leave. Okay. Chaplains have that option a whole lot better than anybody else in the military. So if I decide to stay, the way that I have to work is through the professional line of command, which are the chaplain chain of command. If I'm working in a battalion, I talk it over with the brigade chaplain, the division chaplain, who can even go higher up than I can. If I decide that I can't live with it anymore, then I have the option of leaving.
I understand. Thank you so much for this wonderful explanation. I think we are almost. What do you think?
Can I say something just for a second? This is Latifa.
Tuba. To get conclusion part from our guests. Yeah, go ahead, please.
The question being, what do you do when someone brings to you something that they've done terrible, whether it's as a Army chaplain, as an Army therapist, as a therapist in the prisons, as a therapist. You know, in my 22 years as a therapist, if you call it a technique or the best medicine that I have found is helping clients either forgive someone else or forgive themselves. And a lot of times people will come in and they're testing the water to see, are you able to contain their sin or their mistake? And so sometimes it takes patience. They may talk about patience, not, you know, you have to give them some time for them to find the words to what they've done to themselves or somebody else or what somebody's done to them. But the beauty of the forgiveness is the best medicine.
Maybe
So
then the healing starts, right? Maybe to be
you know, so many times people will come in with so many physical ailments, and I don't know if you hear this term, but Ron and I hear it. You hear that PTSD, you know, and that's impacting the body. But under that, a lot of time is a moral injury, meaning they've done something, they were asked to do something, they witnessed something that really struck their soul. And they don't know how, they don't know what to do with that. And so sometimes it just takes patience and this developing of a very safe bond for them to be able to tell you something that's so horrible, either as a chaplain or as a therapist, but that you can work with them to actually forgive someone or forgive themselves. And that is the medicine. And when you ask yourself, you know, how do you stay with this? You know, people would say to me when I was working with men who committed sexual offenses, they would say, I can't believe you do that work. I hope they get what they deserve. And I would say, why? Do you want what you deserve? I don't want what I deserve. And so God says I have to be merciful to ask for mercy. I have to be forgiving to ask for forgiveness. That doesn't mean I was easy on these men. I was very firm with them that if they violated, I would write them up. But in a way too, to understand that forgiveness, that people are, if you're a chaplain or a therapist, they're going to tell you terrible things. And so you listen and you know that you have the best technique ever, which is forgiveness. Forgiveness of themselves and forgiveness of others.
Wonderful, wonderful. The power.
Thank you, Latifah.
Dr. Ron, go ahead, please.
Say again?
Yeah, your conclusion messages. The end of the.
We are going to wrap up, I think, right? We have 3 minutes left to finish, or 2 minutes left to finish.
Okay. Well, my conclusion would be, as we are looking toward serving God, you know, there's nothing that I can do that's going to help God. Okay, God can do everything by God's self.
Yes.
So I serve God best by serving God's people, God's creation, starting with the people, then starting with the living things, and then going out to the plants and trees and the earth itself. You see, that way we're serving God. And as we do that, as we desire to serve, then an important part of that is to learn about ourselves when we can, to learn about other people, and to try to see how can I connect to the heart of this person out there that may have, as Latifah said, is burdened by some things they may have done, is burdened, is still hurting from somebody else's actions upon them. How can I connect with that heart that's crying out and allow them to unburden themselves? And how can I help them to find some healing with the forgiveness, with the hope, some energy to go forward? Because hope says life is worth living. And those are some of the things that God gives us. And so my prayer is that each one of us that are listening to this, each one of us that have people we're serving, can open our hearts up to what God has to give to us, to say to us, to strengthen us, that we can then give to other people. Amen.
Wonderful, beautiful said. Thank you so much.
So, Tuba Nur Hoca, Latife, Sister Latife, Dr. Ron, thank you, all of you. Actually, we are about to finish, but one of the scholars among us, he is a respectful theologist. His name is Akif. He has a question. Tuba Nur Hoca, can we give him that privilege to ask that question?
Please, I don't know, it's
course.
okay for me as long as my colleagues are okay with time, with their own time flexibility.
Are you okay with that? Maybe.
Yes.
One last question. Okay, this is going to be the last question then.
Yeah, we can open his mic. He can ask Turkish or English, then we can translate it. Okay, brother Akif, I'm trying to open your, I unmute your voice. Yeah. Could you tell your question? Brother Akif, are you there? Just say yes. Yes, one more time. Let me try because yes. Go ahead.
Herkese merhabalar. Teşekkür ederim böyle bir fırsat verdiğiniz için öncelikle. Programda emeği geçen herkese gönülden teşekkür ediyorum. Chat'te yazmıştım ama bir de sözlü olarak tekrarlayayım. Bir an önce isimlerin tespit edilip ne yapmamız lazımsa kursa mı alınacağız, sertifika mı verilecek vesaire profesyonel olarak atılacak birkaç adımdan sonra hemen gönüllü olarak başlayıp arkasından kadrolu bir şekilde yararlı olmak istiyoruz. Fakat kendi başımıza yol almaya kalkınca süreç uzuyor. Korkarım pek çoğumuz da yolda yorulup kalabiliriz. Bundan dolayı bir taraftan geçim derdi var burada. Ama bir taraftan da böyle bir hedef istikametinde bir an önce zamanla yarışıp hedefe ulaşmak istiyoruz. Ve bu noktada yardım istiyoruz.
He wants to do, as an academician coming from an academic background, he wants to contribute. He wants to first educate, himself, and he believed that there might be so many people who are coming from this background, but having so many maybe barriers to maybe language is one of them, and not knowing the system is one of them. As professionals who are working in very important positions in this country, and what would you suggest to these kind of people, being highly educated but coming to a new country, being in a completely different context, educational or cultural context? What would be your suggestions as professionals of this, like as being chaplain or therapist?
As tigers, they became a cat or kitten now. So how can they grow up immediately?
I mean, yeah, go ahead, please.
No, go ahead, Tubanur.
Actually, what he says also, Onur mentioned, is since they have to make their, actually take care of their families also at the same time, but they also want to continue and go deeper in their education and to be able to find jobs, which is a call for some of them, being a hospital chaplain or in another setting. So as professionals, what would be your suggestions to these people? And to be quick, I know it's not a quick, there is no quick solution to this, but for them to have some hope maybe about being able to be on this journey and finish it.
We'll continue to next program if we can't conclude now, but please go ahead. Yeah.
No, definitely.
Latifa, do you have a suggestion first?
Because this is a traumatic issue, that's why Latifa can give better.
Basically, unless they have some training in background and that where they're coming from, it's difficult. It's not like a kitten is going to become a lion right away.
That's what I agree. Yeah.
And you know, you've got to, as we say in CPE, trust the process. There's a process first of learning. Well, there are a lot of ESL, English as a second language courses that you can start taking where you are. There are a lot of civic organizations, churches, and other things that will teach people, you know, the basics of English if people don't have it. In this country, that's got to be one of the important things. From there, in order to get started, one of the things you can do is start volunteering. Once you get some English language, you can start volunteering. If when hospitals open up, you can start as a volunteer, even if it's a volunteer helping take things around the patient's rooms, helping as a lot of different volunteers do, you know, working on a desk to keep things flowing. The volunteer get your feet in with people, and they can recognize who you are. And then as you progress with your training, then they recognize your strengths, your abilities, your willingness, your heart, and from there you can grow into the professional position. But it's a process, and it's not something. I don't have any wisdom about it being a quick fix. And I admit that, you know, one of the guys at the hospital where I work says, "Hey, Ron, you were raised in a bubble," and that's kind of true. You know, I'm not aware of a lot of broad things. So getting advice from people who human resources people in organizations, college professors, because they generally have a broader view, those kinds of things, and looking at volunteer organizations.
Wonderful explain. Thank you so much, Doctor. Sister, what do you think?
So what I would say to our brother is that first and foremost, all this struggle that they are enduring, they are OJT is what we call it. They're on the job training for chaplaincy and therapists. This struggle that they are having to leave their country, sometimes leaving their family, all this is on the job training for being a chaplain or a therapist. I think Ron gives beautiful examples. I would look into the Red Cross. A lot of times the Red Cross has a training on how to be called upon in emergencies, you know, and that would be a way to step in. But then also to, you know, say a prayer and ask God to open the door on which way you're to go, and then to trust, you know, really trust that you would be doing his work. And in the Quran, please forgive me if I don't say it correctly, in the Quran, he says, and he loves all creation, but those are the closest to him are those that serve his creation. So if your intention is to serve his creation in a very holy way, then watch for the ayah, watch for the signs. He will show you which way to go, and he'll open doors and he'll close doors. But know that in this struggle, you're already on the job training for a chaplain and a therapist.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Would you like to translate, or?
I think let me shortly translate then. I actually translated by writing, but maybe I can wrap up, also add some translation to my wrap up. And our audience also say his thanks to in the name of all listeners, since there's so many people now need guidance and hope and also support, and your input and contribution and sharings means so much to each of us, including me. witnessing this traumatic process and this human rights violation in my country of origin was happening and seeing every day, single day. And as a chaplain, as a caregiver, therapist, let's say, I think these kind of programs is a big need, and thanks for sacrifice and thanks for, I know that you are such busy people, but sacrificing your time is so meaningful. And I know that so many people here who are listening right now is feeling grateful to you and for your suggestions. And this is my wrap up comment actually. And for translation in Turkish, shortly to explain in Turkish, zaten birçoğunuz anlamış olabilirsiniz ama anlamayan arkadaşlarımız için veya İngilizceyi şu anda öğrenmekte olan arkadaşlarımız için bir yerden başlamak gerekiyor. Hiçbir zaman yani şunu beklemeyeceğiz. Bugün yattım gece sabah işte hemen olay çözüldü. Zaten bu unrealistik, gerçekçi bir yaklaşım olmaz. Sürece konsantre olacağız. Minik adımlarla bir yerden başlayacağız. Red Cross gibi organizasyonlar var. Oralarda gönüllü olduğunuzda size eğitimler veriliyor. Acil durumlarda nasıl hareket edilir eğitimleri veriliyor. Bunların çok faydasını görürsünüz. CV'nize çok ciddi fayda sağlar ve chaplaincy mesleğinde bir yerden başladığınızda eğitiminizi bitirmek durumunda da değilsiniz bir yerde pozisyon almak için. Bunun şöyle bir çok güzelliği var yani bu anlamda. Hastanede gönüllü olabilirsiniz dedi Dr. Ron. Hastanelerde yapabileceğiniz şeyler oluyor dedi. Masa başı olur, hastayı karşılama olur. Hani sizin seviyenize göre, eğitim seviyenize göre orada yönlendiriyorlar. Bu vereceğiniz zamanlarla yani proseste olduğunuz sürece, bu işin bir parçasından tuttuğunuz sürece bunun sonu gelecektir. Zaten daha sonra işte bu da benim eklemem. Gönüllülükle eğitiminiz arttığı zaman, tecrübeniz arttığı zaman daha sonra size işte şurada şu işi yapar mısın diyeceklerdir. Size olan inançları kuvvetlendiğinde, çalışkanlığınızı, dakikliğinizi en önemli şeyler bu ülkede. Dakikliği, aldığı işi sonuna kadar bitirebilme, verdiği sözü tutma, dürüstlük, dakiklik yani temel hepimizin bildiği ama tekrar etmiş olalım inşallah. Allah nasip etsin. Yani bu tür şeyleri karakterinizdeki dürüstlüğü, güzelliği gördükleri zaman zaten size şu işin ucundan tutar mısınız diyorlar. Eğitiminizle birlikte hepsi bir arada gidiyor. Çok arkadaşımın şahit oldum. Yani bir ders, iki ders, üç ders yoldayken iş bulan birçok arkadaşım oldu. Hiç yani ben bitireceğim de iş bulacağım gibi düşünmeyin. Yol uzun ama zaten hepimiz yoldayız. Hepimiz öğreniyoruz. Bunun sonu bence yok yani ölene kadar öğrenciyiz inşallah yani böyle düşünmek lazım. I just translated. Thank you for your extra sacrifice and for the additional time, Dr. Ron and Sister Latifa. It was such a joy and pleasure and honor for me to meet you and talk to you and listening to you and everything. And thanks to Honor for arranging this wonderful program.
It's my honor as honor. Thank you for your participation.
Yeah.
Fifth language to learn, but you see, never give up, brothers and sisters. Just try to do your best. Continue your academic journey wherever or whenever you have opportunity. Just take it and this is my humble suggestion. Thank you, Dr. Ran. Thank you, Sister Latife, and thank you, Sister Tubanur Hoca. I hope we will meet again, similar events.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again. Nice to meet all of you.
You too, Tuba. Salam alaikum.
Alaikum salam, sister.
Also, Dr. Ran Hojam is saying that word when he starts our classes. How do you say this, Dr. Ran?
Which word?
Greetings of the Latife, or our way to say.
Oh, Salam alaikum. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Peace to you all. Amen.
Peace to all of us.
Brothers and sisters, see you for the next event. This is the third of the Dert Koleksiyonerleri, Chaplaincy. Bu bizim üçüncü programımızdı. Dert Koleksiyonerleri, Chaplainler adı altında. İnşallah dördüncü programda buluşmak dileğiyle. Allah'a emanet olun.